Hello, everyone. It's so great to be here. I'm part of the sustainability, going green, sustainability and marketing panel here, and I am super excited to be here with all of these panelists. I'm the moderator today. I'm Julie Anderson. I'm CEO of Plastic Oceans International. We're an organization that fosters local sustainable communities to end plastic pollution. And we focus a lot on achieving sustainability to really end the problem of plastic pollution, which in turn really addresses things like sustainable climate change and waste and all of these other issues. Right now, the sad thing about where we are in the world is humans impact the world on every level of the earth, and ultimately it is threatening access to water security, access to food access, and then there is overconsumption, which then leads to excessive waste. And so we're really putting a huge strain not only on the planet, but then we are also taking away we're impacting ecosystems that also threaten economies, whether it's the fishing industry or industries that are dependent on the environment. We're also taking away the economics. So there are all these interrelated issues that come back to how we as humans do business. And it is really, when I talk about sustainability, it is really it starts with defining sustainability, so we're all on the same page. I think often in the marketing world, sustainability only thinks of the environment, but sustainability is really much bigger. It's a bigger concept. It is a feature of the overall system in its entirety. And that system is made up of all of our industries. It's made up of the people that make up those industries and the economics of those. It's the profitability of those industries. And so sustainability is a feature used to understand that interrelationship between environment, economics, and the social impacts across all supply chains, so within each industry. And I'm super excited to be here with 3 different industry leaders who have taken the very bold step to start their businesses within their industry to go sustainable, and take in all of these new factors and really be pioneers in their industries. We have David Watkins with Dirty Labs, and they're in the industry of household goods, cleaning goods industry. We have Kristy Caylor with 4 Days, and really targeting fashion industry. And then we also have Anna Sheffield, who is with fine jewelry. And within all of these industries, they all have their negative impacts, that currently exist, but because of their work, they are really being pioneers in reducing those negative impacts. And I think the first thing to start off, we'll start off just with a simple question. Why would you embark on this path of really taking a sustainable approach to your business? And let's start with David. What prompted you to go down this line?
Yeah, so cleaning products weren't really my professional background coming into this. I had worked in consumer electronics and other consumer products, doing design, manufacturing, product development, those kind of things, and primarily in electronic hardware. And I had lived and worked in Asia for a number of years at the sort of heart of manufacturing for many of those things. And I think it was amazing to work on products that you saw your friends and people use out in the wild all the time. But at the same time, you were designing products that may have a life cycle of a year, maybe 2. I think it prompted me to want to participate in a different type of product category where we could create things that people need and have it be a better solution. I was introduced to my co-founder, who's a really talented chemist with a background in R&D and sustainability. And he kind of comes from the traditional big chemical corporation background. I think he was kind of coming to a similar realization as well. And together, we got started on creating Dirty Labs.
Fantastic. And I just go around and just talk about each business, and you, Anna?
My background was in fine art, and I started in jewelry about 20 years ago when I launched my first brand, which is called Bing Bang. And then I launched into fine jewelry about 10 years into that. So maybe 12 years ago, I started in the fine jewelry industry. And I think in the beginning, it wasn't a conversation launching a brand in 2002, like corporate culture, sustainability, like ethical manufacture. It was just not, it was not a topic of conversation. And it's become obviously more prevalent as the need to adapt, and for all industries to take more creative approaches to solving these problems that are driving climate change, among other, like, as you mentioned, impacts on the planet and on humanity and nature, all in together. So I think in the last, it's become really my mission in the last 10 years since launching into the fine jewelry to really try to engineer new and innovative approaches to how we can tackle some of the worst aspects of the jewelry industry. There's a lot of waste. There's a lot of disruption to the planet, like obviously with mining, but there are also a lot of solutions like recycling, repurposing, reusing. And then I've tried to take that beyond just the level of sustainability, also into like ethical elements of manufacture and sourcing. So where our stones are cut, where they're mined, how the people in those industries and in those communities are treated, and to make products really engineered towards like fulfilling like a vast majority of the product being sustainable or ethical. And then beyond that, just, really approaching like the other layer, like you mentioned, like human interaction, like the culture that we create, the communities that we're in. So starting within the culture of the company and expanding into how we give back, and really leaning into new and hopefully beneficial ways to for our company to grow and continue to give back to the community that we're from.
Fashion industry for over 15 years and kind of grew up in a mass environment, meaning I worked for the Gap for 5 years, and really at that point, not dissimilar, spent a lot of time in Asia and saw kind of how manufacturing was happening. And I think it was at that point similar to what Anna just said. Nobody was really talking about our impact on people and the planet in a quantitative way, and yet we were making so much stuff. And when you saw the human impact, when you saw the excess, when you saw the amount of markdowns and returns in the business ecosystem itself, I was just like, wait a minute, this doesn't feel like the right thing to do. And so for me, it really set me on this course of thinking through, like, every decision we make as a business has a human and a planetary implication. And why aren't we building better systems? And why aren't we doing that through the lens of good business and profitability and customer engagement and customer experience? Like, it was always this kind of like pest where people were like, nah, sustainability, CSR, we'll let them deal with it. And it was like, why isn't it intrinsic to the way we're designing? Why isn't it intrinsic to the way we're building business? And so for me, I just became very passionate about that. I actually had a startup prior to this in the luxury space called Mayette, and we worked with artisans and in developing economies. And I became like very acutely aware of the impact that our raw material kind of growing and the pesticides in the industry, the impact that was having on communities globally, and the fact that as a waste stream, the industry produces 80 pounds of textile waste per person annually. A good amount of that, 85% of all textiles, end up in landfill. What doesn't gets shipped off to third world countries and ends up in streets and gutters there. That's terribly negatively impactful. And I started getting involved in circular economy conversations and was like, wow, this idea of regeneration seems to make a lot of sense. It removes our dependency on raw material. It engaged customers in new behavior. Who doesn't have too much stuff at home? Everybody. Isn't it hard to get rid of? Like, yes, 85, it's like so much of it ends up in landfill. So that's really was my inspiration for moving into this space of circularity in fashion, because I felt like there was just a new model to be had that engaged us as customers in a new behavior. We were ready for it. I feel like customers are ready for it, and the business in the industry is behind. And so we set out to kind of fix that.
It's fantastic. And I think what all of you have touched on, it is the transparency of each of your industries, like what you learn when you're in that industry. And it is the transparency to the consumer and what they think is happening, or they just simply don't know what's happening. You just assume everything is great and somebody's taking care of minimizing the waste or the chemicals runoff. I don't think anybody intentionally goes to buy cleaning products or laundry products thinking, I'm going to buy the one that is going to go straight into the water runoff and go straight into the ocean and dump a bunch of chemicals into that. And it is when you're only in that industry that you can start to see where those gaps are that are just simply unsustainable. And whether it's unsustainable because it's polluting the environment or unsustainable because it's ethically impacting people, and how to get those things. And I guess the question is how do you then see the consumers, like where the gaps are in terms of what you're doing and making your business profitable? What do you need the consumers to understand? Because they are a lot of industries, and consumers want to do the right thing, and they're going after terms like eco-friendly and just the generic term of sustainability or biodegradable. And these terms are now starting to become greenwashing terms in the marketing world. How do you target that, or what do you feel that needs to be understood or changed in the system? Now, let's start with David.
Sure. I think for better or for worse, sustainability is at least on the general consciousness in a more significant way than it ever has been before. So whether or not that's greenwashing that people are marketing to people, I think that it's at least becoming a factor in people's decision making, which is certainly a start. For us, I think we like to differentiate ourselves a little bit. And not just being a cleaning products brand, but really a cleaning innovations lab. And, I think in comparison to maybe some other startups in the space, 3 of the 8 people that work at Dirty Labs are chemists. And so that's kind of at our core. And so one of the very nice things is when people come in through customer service, or, whether or not we're writing posts on our blog or information about our product or the effects of the products on the environment, that all those things are really rooted in science and really run through those chemists. So I think we do have an expert point of view that we can share with our customers and our audience. But in terms of how do consumers get to us, or what do they need to understand to make us successful? I think it's happening, and that consumers are becoming more and more educated. And if you look at, the questions we get through our customer service, it's way more in depth and educated than we would have ever guessed before. And I think that's certainly a positive trend. But this is why we got into this business, was to educate people, and hopefully once that education happens, the choice is easy.
And I guess I think I'll go one more step there, and then it is with new consumer products, and products maybe competitive products, and differentiating from them, and then the use of marketing terms. I think we touched on this earlier, so I'm going to bring it up with there are competitors that you have that maybe the pods and paper sheet laundry sheets and pods for dishwashers or laundry that have chemicals in them that known as PVAs or PVOHs that I would, in the science world, consider microplastics, nanoplastics. How do you then get the consumer to understand the difference between, taking that's something that looks like it's less plastic, not as damaging, that says that it's biodegradable? How do you feel that should be approached?
Yeah, stepping back a second, I think that some of these different form factors being introduced by a lot of different brands is great in that, I think that it opens consumers' consciousness and willingness to try other form factors and other things versus which colored plastic jug do I buy at the store, right? And so I think that there's a willingness for people to, take a chance on new products, right? So I think that's the positive. You had mentioned greenwashing and things like that. And I think where pods and sheets kind of run into a little bit of a problem is that, yes, you don't need, let's say, a plastic jug to contain the liquid because they're encased. But what's encasing them is essentially plastic itself, right? So it's dissolvable plastic. And, I think that if you're worried about plastic from a jug becoming microplastics, it's even like more significant when you're just straight up dissolving those things in the water supply. I think that, with those types of products, they claim that they're biodegradable and what have you. But the conditions that you need to supply to make them biodegradable just don't really exist in our wastewater treatment facilities. And it doesn't generally happen very naturally, at least to completion. And so for us, it's really about partnering with retailers and, media channels and other types of, agencies and people who kind of monitor these kind of things to get the word out. And we certainly do that through our educational pieces as well.
Perfect. That makes sense. And then what you touched on is really waste stream. So it is what we're talking about is how do we minimize that waste, whether that is in the microplastics form or just minimizing negative impact or just wasteful chemicals. And I think this is what you talked about, Kristy, is one type of method or form is using the circular economy approach or circularity, or the loops, closed loop system, where we actually keep resources within a system rather than it going straight to landfill waste or into the environment. How did you get into closed? I mean, you mentioned how you got into closed loop, but like, why is it important to you, and how do you see that really working into the fashion industry?
Yeah, I think I always approach it, where is the customer and what is the pain point and how can we help solve that with a better solution? And so in my view, everybody has clothing that piles up in their homes and they really don't know what to do with it, or they do their best with it, but their best isn't necessarily the best for the planet. So I think there's always that component. You touched upon it before, like education and transparency, but through the lens of like, how's this going to help you? I think that's super important when you're trying to get customers on board with particularly a new behavior. But for us, in order to execute on the promise, you have to kind of start with supply chain. And so I think similarly, like you have to think about all of those inputs and make pretty hard decisions on what you're using to make sure that the output is 100% recyclable. And to me, that was a really cool design problem. That was a great constraint, because when you know that 70% of textiles have plastic in them, you're like, okay, well, let's start with natural fibers. That's a good spot because we know we can actually recycle them. Well, what does that mean? We can do, where are our limits? How do we push the limits? How do we get more innovative? And then how are we really incorporating those recycled materials in a way that feels fun and fashionable? I think too often these concepts and principles sound hard to people. People are like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to make my own toothpaste. I don't know what I'm gonna do. And it's like, or it can't be that hard. So it's packaging it in a way that feels just fun and simple. And for us in fashion, it's about personal expression. It's about style. Like, it just, to be sustainable doesn't mean you have to be boring. Like, you can still be fun and have a personality. And so I think about it that way. I think about, the actual system itself and what that design kind of challenge is. And then how do we make this something that's really of value to the customer across multiple kind of touch points, not just like meeting their sustainability desires, but like giving them the product they want at the price they want in a system that's super easy and like easing anxiety. I call it like I think everybody, or at least like the generation we typically speak to, which is very Gen Z, like has a high dose of planet panic. Everybody's kind of like, oh, it's like, let's ease that. Let's give you something that you can do to really engage in a better behavior. So,
and how do your customers feel about this new way of the return system? I mean, I was raised on a very much buy new stuff, right. And I need a shiny new shirt.
Because the industry that's how we make money. New, like latest, greatest, drop, limited edition. That's always been the way to drive revenue. And I think there's a world in which it's kind of a high-minded thought, but it's like, just using product, as long as we're washing it properly, as long as it's made with the right products, like using it and enjoying it is not our problem. It's how it's made and what we do after the fact. And so I think about it that way, which is like, still play, still have fun, just participate in this circular behavior. And then you can have everything you want without causing the harm, because you can trust us to select good materials, make good products, and do what's right with it at the end. And so the customers, I think, at least our core customer, I mean, they love it. Like they use it all the time. We offer like a larger take back service because we realize like the end of life of a product should be very long in the future if we make great products. So, but what about today? How do you swap out kind of that toxic fashion that you have in your closet for better options? And so we give people an option to do that. And it just starts you down this relationship that we're building around kind of trust and authenticity and zero waste.
That's fantastic. And I like that you brought that up, that there's still something fun about sustainability. It is not about giving up lifestyles. And one thing about working in a sustainability space is there's this knee-jerk reaction that either you have to apologize to me for doing anything and enjoying life in any way, or there's some type of, I hate it, like a hippie way, like you have to shed your lifestyle completely. And I think there is ways to still maintain the beauty and the quality of life lifestyles. And I think that's what I'll go over to you, Anna. And I think that is like jewelry is beautiful and it creates businesses. It represents cultures and identities, community identities. And so it's more than just sourcing and waste in your business. What do you, well, I guess some of your challenges that you see with your jewelry line?
Yeah, I mean, there are many unique challenges just to the industry itself, and similarly to clothing and home goods or cleaning supplies or beauty industry, all among, there are so many ways of like positioning oneself as a brand or maker to say that you're doing more than you are, really, like recycled gold. You know, it's like nobody just takes gold and like throws it away. Of course there's recycled gold, but it's like, how do you make sure that it's recycled? How do you go further? Like what other elements can be reused or repurposed? So like we have a program where we use all of the tiny diamonds that are Melly, like detail diamonds, halos, and pave. These all come from a reclaim program, and they're sorted. So we have gray, white, and champagne colors. So I try to design using those. I try to make, I try to like reverse engineer like products that we find that I know that I can use that are sustainable into the collection at large. So it's not just the recycled gold. It's like I'm going beyond that and using a recycled, essentially, diamonds, or positioning like antique diamonds as an alternative, or even in the world now that we have with so much like lab grown diamond is like such a new thing, but you have, not to be slanderous, but you have like, your De Beers kind of brand, and then you have like a Foundry or Latitude, and you have these brands that are like, not talking about the sustainability factor or administering anything sustainable at all in the process. And then you have people that are like zero carbon or like net zero, like where they're really trying to like not just offset, but like actually make it so this thing has no impact on the earth whatsoever in order to manufacture a diamond. So but if you don't want that, then maybe you want a recycled diamond. Like maybe you want a diamond that has been recut from like an antique setting. So there are many diamonds in the world. There are many stones in the world. There are lots of metals in the world. There's also like, there are a lot of great initiatives around like mercury-free mining. Obviously that's a huge issue with regards to gold. But as I mentioned a little bit earlier, like I think it's just about getting people thinking about where the materials come from in everything that we use, and that long process that's involved, and the impact. So like, with our everything in our home, everything that we use, our electronics, people don't really recycle copper, but they should, because there's giant holes in the earth as a result of a lot of our electronics, for example. But so yeah, in my own way, we've been trying to just continually look for materials that like allow us to make pieces that they're meant to last a lifetime. So they're not meant to be, thrown away. It's fine jewelry, but it's like, how can we bring that to you with the most integrity from the get-go? And then how can the company itself operate in the most sustainable way? Like with the luxury industry, for example, like packaging it's such a thing. And like, you have to have a certain level of packaging, and you can have paper recyclable, but is it really recyclable? Because if there's certain, finishes on it, it actually is no longer recyclable. Or how can we make sure that you don't have like, too much weight in a package that we ship, but we still have to use a certain type of packaging to be secure, because we're shipping things with a high dollar value. So it's just sort of solving lots of problems from when you figure out where the bar is and then kind of working backwards to reverse engineer how you can do that as sustainably as possible. And it's very complex and it's tedious. And it's often a little bit thankless because you're not able to, it's not like you're able to like yell from the mountaintops, like, I stayed up so late last night trying to find a source for this thing that no one cares that I do it. Or the fact that we, you know, when we had offices like prior to COVID, but we were doing, everybody was eating salads at their desk and all this like recyclable or compostable plastic containers. And then we put it in the garbage anyway. And I was like, there's got to be a solution. So like we set up a program for having a local CSA pick up our compost. You know, it's just all of those extra layers of like, how can we do more and do better? So I think it's not just the product itself, but also like how you run the company and the impact that you try to have like in your daily experience here on this planet.
It's absolutely right. I mean, it is so daunting, again, to take on all of these tasks, to be sourcing, you know, from even your internal business operations and sourcing and really working across such a huge supply chain within each industry. What do you think, like, I guess if you were to implement one policy or a legislative change so that your industry would all follow one thing to make it easier for your business to succeed even more so, what would that be? And maybe it's not a legislative, maybe if there was a public service announcement and the government started just running ads for consumer education, what would that education piece be to make it a little bit simpler for the success of your business? And
yeah, I mean, I think across the board, if I may, I think it's like we've all kind of touched on this, it's just the ability for words to be not indicative of the actuality that they represent. Like, you know, for the longest time you go to the grocery store and it was like natural was like the word, you know, and now it's like organic and you're like, is this really organic? You know, like it's like wine, even they could put so much stuff in the wine and still call it organic, even because, you know, additives can be organic materials. So there's just so much bait and switch, you know, like so much like snake oil salesman kind of like positing about being sustainable. So I think legislatively, it would be great if there was more oversight, whether that came from the federal government or local. I think California obviously has made a lot of strides towards specific like paint products you can't buy here, or, you know, outlawing styrofoam or plastic bags. You know, there's community driven efforts towards that. But I think it would be nice if there was a way to really seed out the people that are doing it actually, and the people that are just using a fancy word that kind of covers up the fact that they're not.
Yeah, I think in cleaning, I would say transparency in terms of like what ingredients are in things would be pretty key. And I think you talked about in clothing as well, where you'd mentioned how like 100% organic cotton t-shirt doesn't necessarily have to be 100%, right? Like there's some minor allowance of something else, right?
Up to 3% other.
Right. And so, you know, I think that, you know, with cleaning products, it's a, you know, moderate, depending on the claims, right? It's a fairly like unregulated space to a pretty large degree. And one of the things that we're trying to do is make that an easier choice through education and being, you know, as transparent about not only what we're using, but where it comes from and why it's used. So we share that on our site as well. But, you know, I think we are seeing some positive change. So for example, like the state of New York is curbing the use of 1,4-dioxane, which is a, you know, chemical that's pretty difficult to filter out and prevalent in like the water and groundwater in Long Island, for example. But, you know, I think that additional policies like that would certainly, you know, affect what the competitive landscape looks like, just because there's a lot of hidden things that people are using that may not necessarily be the cleanest or best choice.
And no, that's fantastic. I'm going to take this opportunity to put in a call to action. As you talk about ingredients, it's really comes down to truth in labeling, and really having the label represent what a consumer would be buying. And I think right now there is AB 1201, a new legislative that has passed California legislation, and it's part of the circular economy package bills. and it's truth in labeling for compostable products. And
Mm.
really, if it is, you can't just throw compostable on a label, because as a consumer, I think, oh, that sounds good. It's compostable, but it's not compostable like an apple or a banana peel. It's compostable and very structured, either
Commercially compostable, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
with chemicals, or it's really confined spaces that most cities do not have that level of infrastructure to even compost those type of items. And the same thing goes with truth in labeling and even the recycling. I mean, you see those, the triangle, the chasing arrows for recycling. We see that and you think, oh, it's recyclable, but very often it's not recyclable. I mean, you don't even have the capabilities, and there's no incentive for people or for producers, manufacturers to even use recycled material. So they're still going to that virgin material. So I think that as this is really a lot of Californians, it's supporting these new bills and the circular economy package bills, and hopefully Governor Newsom passes them this month and allows them onto the ballot for next year. There was one question, question that came in, and as you start up your company, your businesses, are you finding that you're getting investors to invest in these new concepts, in like sustainable businesses, or are they still sort of following the mass trends, which may not fit within the sustainability, like the sustainable models right now, in terms of profitability compared to something that may be larger scaled?
I would say, having experience in that space a couple of times over, it's shifted a lot. I think that investors actually care about sustainability because they think customers care. And so I think it always boils down, I mean, unless you're in a true impact zone, which there's a growing community of impact investors, there is a profitability and a bottom line to all of this. And I actually kind of like the design challenge, think that that's a great business challenge, because true sustainable ecosystems should also be profitable. So if we can solve those problems, like the investors make money, the world benefits, and we've changed business. So I think in short, it's becoming much more of a focus for people. Sometimes it's a bit of lip service, like, oh, we love sustainability. I'm like, what do you know about sustainability beyond that? Probably not a lot. And then there's the true like impact investors deeply thinking about ecosystems and change and evolution. And, I think what David said earlier, it's like more is more, which is good. And even if it's not perfect, it's still progress. So that's what I see. Yeah.
Yeah, it is an interesting thing. We encounter that too with our investor pool as well. I mean, we certainly have investors that only invest now in sustainable businesses. But I mean, to your point earlier, like, what is a sustainable business, right? And I think that, sustainability, safety, and efficacy are kind of the key pillars of our brand. But we're trying to make improvements in all three, and we're probably not perfect in any of those categories, right? But I think that the combination of them may set us apart, as a whole.
Absolutely.
I don't have investors, so I can't speak to that. But as an independently financed woman, I do think it's important, and I see it within the industry at large. And definitely, I think the conversation, as you both mentioned, is like going in that direction, whether it's fully impact or people just really want to see that you have some genuine effort being put towards being sustainable and real and authentic.
Absolutely. I mean, I definitely believe that sustainability is, even if they don't know what sustainability really means, even to go towards that will grow a bigger market. I mean, I compare it to what organic food was 25 years ago, where you had maybe 3 produce items that were organic. My mother started buying it, and she didn't know really why she was buying it, but it seemed like a good thing. But now you go to the grocery store, even your average grocery store, they'll have a fairly significant section. And I think that's a sign of trying to do best as a consumer, whether you know the details. I guess, and in terms of just building your, brand building, do you look for partners in terms of like when marketing? How are you looking? Do you partner to like increase your marketability? Is it just on an education aspect that you see that marketing part?
Well, for us, I mean, laundry detergent is kind of where we started, right? So laundry detergents are our first products. And we picked laundry detergent for a couple of reasons. I think one, it was a technical challenge to innovate in a laundry detergent, let's say, versus a surface cleaner or something like that. So it was a bigger challenge there, but also it's a care solution for heavily branded products like apparel and home textiles and that sort of thing. And I think we certainly welcome brand partnerships and have done a few things. And it's spanned, whether it's like women's wear or to home textile stuff or to, even like we're working with a fairly upscale like laundromat to spread the message there. I think that, as a new brand, it's always really challenging to get the word out. And I'm sure that like a lot of our brands are competing for the same audiences all the time, right? Like, I think for a laundry detergent brand, like our customer base seems to be younger than we expected. And so, getting that mind share and getting the word out is probably the most important thing that we are focusing on right now, because I think we feel pretty comfortable that we've got a great product. And so really it's about increasing awareness at this point.
And I guess just another thing on the last thing of the price point and really your demographics that you target. Sometimes this new sustainable business models do come with a little bit more of a higher price point. How do you target maybe those people that can afford it? Is it real? I guess you've mentioned it was, well, I guess how do you target your specific demographic that can afford it and are aware of what you're selling, your business model?
We took a pretty hard stance on accessibility from a price point perspective. We're not the cheapest thing in the market, but we're definitely affordable. And I think that was intentional because sustainability can be inaccessible to people. And we also felt like that sense of value plays to this younger consumer. So again, we'll never be the bottom basement price, and that's just not responsible. Frankly, we'd be doing something
never
wrong.
Should have been that price to begin with.
Exactly. I think there's questions as to whether anybody should be able to make product that cheap. But I do think accessibility, we think a lot about just from a community building perspective as well. It opens up a broader audience. So like, how can we be mindful about affordability and accessibility?
Mm-hmm.
Pay attention to that.
Yeah, at Dirty Labs, we're 25 cents a load. And I think one of the interesting things is that we've gone extra lengths to make sure that consumers understand not to overdose our product, right? And, I think that I've heard stories about how other brands have, increased the size of their caps to increase their gross margins by X% because people are using, more liquid than they need, for example. And, we went to extra lengths to make sure that we were really giving customers the full load count in the bottles of laundry detergent they're buying. We made a conscious effort to make sure that we're going to be a premium option just because of like the cost of the technologies that we're putting in there, but at the same time we didn't want to create some exclusive luxury brand. We wanted it to be accessible as well.
Fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, with fine jewelry, we do obviously have a range, but I think back to your question about the marketing, it is very much about trying to display in any capacity across all different channels, like how much heart and soul we put into the effort. We do an impact report every year where we try to measure the impact of like, had we not done this would have happened. Like, sort of the offset kind of measurements, and to show that we're trying to continue to improve and to get insights from consumers and our brand followers, like if there's things that they think we could be doing better. So I think the dialogue is really important too.
And there's one question here that is great, I think, even to end on it. It can be overwhelming to think about all the negative impacts of sustainability and just constantly seeing that whole down your value chain there. How do you all, within leaders within your space, do you stay balanced day to day and stay optimistic and keep pushing through and not go back to the dark side?
It's hard. It's definitely not easy. I mean, for me, it's just, I do it on a personal level too. Like we we compost at my house. I've been vegetarian for 30 years. I'm mostly vegan because my husband's vegan. We tried the local I grew up with hippie parents, so like all the different, I do actually make a lot of my own stuff at home. I'm one of those kind of weirdos, but yeah, it's just like as much as you can. I think it's good to sort of stretch yourself into that space and not feel afraid to try different things. Like maybe you do want to make your own deodorant and never have to buy a plastic container again, at least for that one product, you know, or carry your own coffee cup with you when you go out. I don't know, different things.
You,
Yeah, I
David?
think so. I live in Portland, Oregon now. I moved here from Manhattan, and I think that one of the things I really noticed by having, I think we have 5 different sort of waste bins that you set out every week, right? And so you've got your compost, you've got your recycling, you've got your glass recycling, and then trash. I think that when you're able to really like not put your waste down a chute in an apartment building in Manhattan, and you really are sorting through everything, you've got a really good idea of like what you're using and what you're going through. And so we think of, as a brand, we think that consumers certainly have a lot to navigate through in this sort of rat race of sustainability, right? And it can be daunting or challenging at times. And I think a lot of it feels like it's fairly common sense, and that's something that you can kind of monitor. And as you're become more and more conscious of different things, you can be, make better and better choices, I suppose. But I don't think that there's a hard line that makes somebody like irresponsible, right? But certainly we can all become a little bit more responsible.
Yeah, I mean, to add to that, I think for me, and I don't know if this resonates with you guys, I think the reason I do what I do is because I'm internally optimistic about the future, and I just believe it's going to be better. So there's something just that runs true through that all the time, even in challenging times. I'm like, no, but there's a solution. There's a solution. But I think it's also about small step changes for people, because I think if too much, and we do it even internally as a team, like we'll do like a zero waste challenge for people, and it'll be simple things like don't use a disposable coffee cup this week, and like document it. And then if somebody messes up, they're like, oh, I messed up. Like be honest about it, like have fun with it, like what can you do to think through those little step changes in life that kind of point to the values that we're all trying to live by. So that's what we do, is we try and make it fun.
That's fantastic. And I think it just even to end is, as I started, sustainability is a feature of an entire system, and that system's made up of each individual person that makes up an industries that make up this entire system. So it is not to only think of a system as just the globe, the earth, but it is us as individuals and what we can do day to day, make small changes with our means, within our access, and within our just capabilities, I think. I just want to, this all the time we have today, I just want to thank you all, David, Kristy, Anna, you've been incredible, and it's just really inspirational what you do. And I hope everyone goes out, gets Dirty Labs, buys some fine jewelry from Anna Sheffield, and sign up for 4 days because they have great clothes there too. So thank you so much. It's been great.
Thank you guys so much.